not tomorrow.
Never, never in my name.
Not today, not tomorrow.
Never, never in my name.
Not today, not tomorrow.
Never, never in my name.
Not in my name, not in my name.
Never, never in my name.
Not in my name, not in my name.
Never, never in my name.
Modi, Modi, you can't hide. You committed genocide. Modi, Modi, you can't hide. You committed genocide. Modi, Modi, you can't hide. You committed genocide.
India society. As you know, the Not in My Name protests that have been going on in various Indian cities like Bombay, Hyderabad, Trivandrum, Delhi, where it actually started. We at the SOAS India Society, we decided to show our solidarity as well, as many of us come from India, and we've been very saddened by the recent spate of lynchings, especially the latest one of Junaid Khan in Haryana. And we have quite the program here. We have some speakers before we start marching off to Tavistock Square. And first, we'd definitely like to thank everybody for joining, and the speakers who've decided to take time out of their schedules to show solidarity and with their words. First off, we have Suhi Sinha, faculty member at SOAS. We'd like him to come and say some words, please.
Thanks to SOAS India Society for organizing this event and for all of you for coming. I'm sure all of you are aware of the extremely gruesome killings which are going on all across North India. But whereas they've picked up speed and perhaps now we can hear of 1, 2, 3 of those lynchings on a weekly basis, let us not forget that this is a pattern of violence that has been unleashed very dramatically and deliberately from the time of 2013 to the run-up, in the run-up for the 2014 elections. We remember what happened in Muzaffarnagar. We also remember right after 2014 into 2015, the so-called beef killings started off with Akhlaq and a range of other people, most of these primarily suspected of eating beef. We have also seen over that particular period not just Muslim communities and Muslim individuals being lynched to death, but also in Una and in other places, lynch mobs that were heavily involved in the killing of Dalits. There has been a deliberate attempt on the part of the government to make this into a Hindu-Muslim polarization issue. Many of us have been arguing that without this kind of polarization and without a continuation of implicit or explicit violence, the BJP does not think that it has chances to return to power with the majority that it does in 2019.
Yes.
We therefore must see these lynchings not as random events taking place in some kind of an unconnected way, because the continuous threats to these killings are provided by speeches by the very prominent members of the BJP. One remembers very clearly Modi's own speech about the Pink Revolution in Western UP. We remember also Amit Shah's speech in 2015, where he said that anyone who eats beef in any BJP ruled states will not be able to hold us accountable for what we will do to them. We will also, at this point, like to remind people of Yogi Adityanath in UP, where he basically gave speeches, highly inflammatory speeches, still doing their rounds on YouTube and on Twitter, where he and his followers directly accuse Muslims and threaten them with collective punishment for the killing, for being involved in the cattle trade. Apart from the fact that this is a very communally polarizing issue in terms of its identification with Dalits and with Muslims and their dietary habits, it is condemnable that in very few of these cases any direct action has been taken by government. In fact, the opposite has happened. In the case of Akhlaq, we found that when the killer died, a minister from Modi's cabinet, the Minister of Culture, Mahesh Sharma, goes there to meet the family and drapes his dead body in the Indian flag. I cannot see that there can be a clearer statement of support from the Modi government to those who have actually perpetrated these acts. In the case of Rajasthan, when Pehlu Khan was killed, the Rajasthan government said that this was most likely a cattle smuggler. In a third atrocity of this sort, the Chief Minister of Rajasthan refers to the killing as a sad demise rather than a lynching. There have been lynchings of cattle trading Muslims in Jharkhand, including one only this morning. The pattern is very clear. This is happening not just primarily but almost exclusively in BJP-run states. There has not been, to my mind, a lynching outside of this, except perhaps in one case in Assam, which of course is also now a BJP-run state. In addition to creating an atmosphere of absolute terror among people who are Muslims or Dalits all across the country, some of you have obviously seen earlier on Eid, the beginning of the practice of putting a black band around your arm that we are following here today. But that is a very strong symbol that a sizable percentage of India's population, and today in 150 cities across India, hundreds of thousands of people who are demonstrating in solidarity with them, seem to think that this kind of state of affairs cannot last, must be condemned, and those who are guilty of this, including those in government who are complicit in this, must be held accountable and must be named and shamed internationally, given the absolute supine nature of the Indian mainstream media at this point. There have been a number of reports in the Indian media for the last couple of days that have been trying to accuse those of us who are outraged by the lynch mobs of being anti-India, and quite frankly, if that is a label that they would like to give to us, I'm not unhappy to accept it. Secondly, they have also been trying to make an argument that this has nothing to do with religion, and that in fact they have come up with a list of lynchings from 2003 to 2010. All killings by mobs are obviously to be condemned, but the continued and controlled slippage towards anarchy with a view to 2019 that we see right now is very apparently a strategy decided by the highest levels of the BJP and should be called out for that. Secondarily, I would like to say that the impact of cattle-related lynchings across northern and western India has completely decimated the economy connected with dairy products, with leather and with meat, thereby making millions of people unemployed and throwing their livelihoods into risk. So there is also an economic argument. Finally, I would like to say that I myself am not a believing Hindu, though I was born in a Hindu family. I would like to urge those people who do consider themselves to be believing Hindus to reject what is being done in their name and to join those kinds of initiatives back in India which have tried to reclaim Hinduism from the Hindutva forces. Likewise, I'm not only not a nationalist, but I'm anti-nationalism. Those of you who feel nationalist should also consider exactly what is being done in your name.
Thank you so much, Professor Sinha. We'd like to now call up Kalpana Wilson of the South Asia Solidarity Group to speak.
Hi, I've been asked to ask everybody to draw in a little bit closer, if you can. Thank you. Yeah, okay. So, one of the things which I've read about in the last few days, when there's been a whole stream of horrific news coming out of India, one of the things which really struck me was the fact that when Junaid, this 15-year-old child, was lying on the platform of the station, bleeding to death in his brother's arms, there were around 200 people in that station at that time, and not a single one of them apparently had said that they saw anything happen or that they saw him bleeding to death. And this is something which I think is very disturbing. And I think what we're doing here, gathering today, one of the things we're doing is saying, Junaid, we see you. We're not going to accept a vision which makes Junaid's life without any value. which makes him killable, which makes him disposable. We're not accepting that. We're saying, Junaid, we see you. But having this protest, this not in my name protest, needs to be a lot more than that. That in itself is not enough. Because we cannot simply use this notion, not in my name, to deny responsibility for what's going on. It has to be about standing in solidarity with Muslims, with Dalits, with Christians, with all of those who are under attack. And it has to be about protesting. Protesting here, protesting at the Indian High Commission, protesting everywhere in this country which represents the Indian state. Because we have to be very clear, as Subir explained, it is ultimately the Indian state and the Modi government and its RSS stormtroopers which are responsible for every one of these incidents. Mobilizing and building on the very deep roots of social violence which already exist. Now, in this country, in Britain, when we use the slogan "Not in my name," one of the first things which comes to mind is the protest against the Iraq war, which happened in 2003, when 1 million people came on the streets to protest against the British government's war in Iraq. And in a way, what we have to do today is the same thing, because the Indian state is waging a war on its own people. And we have to say that that war is not in our name. We have to say that we're not going to allow ourselves to be mobilized for that war. And of course, as Subir was also saying, this hasn't all happened overnight. We're not going to forget what happened in Gujarat in 2002, and we're not going to forget Narendra Modi's direct responsibility for the genocide of Muslims in Gujarat, for the horrific murders of women, of children during those few days in March 2002. And people are talking now about how Modi is silent and how Modi is not condemning what's happening. But it's far more than that. He's directly responsible. You've heard about the speeches he made during his election campaign, which really kicked off the whole so-called cow protection and beef-based killing, when he talked about a pink revolution of beef trade happening in India. Now, I'd also like to say that this slogan, "Not in my name," cannot be about denying Brahminism. It cannot be about denying the caste supremacy which is at the heart of Hinduism. And in South Asia Solidarity Group, we recognize that we cannot begin to fight against the fascist forces of Hindutva without recognizing this and challenging it wherever it occurs. And this really brings me to what's happening now in Britain. Because we're here in Britain, and we have to take our struggle forward here in this country in whatever way we can. And there are two things which are particularly important. Firstly, I think we must raise awareness beyond the Indian diaspora about what the Modi government, this murderous government, really represents. So that when people think of Trump and his Islamophobia, they also start to think of Modi. When people think about Turkey's Erdogan and his human rights violations, they also start to think about Modi. When they think about the apartheid state of Israel, they also start to think about the kind of state which Modi is trying to turn India into. And the other thing we have to do here in Britain very urgently is to expose what the right-wing fascistic Hindutva organizations here in Britain are doing, because they are a huge source of material support for these killer gangs of the RSS and so on in India. So we have to expose them, we have to target them. One of the things which they're doing at the moment, which you may or may not be aware of, is that they are opposing the legislation which seeks to ban caste discrimination in Britain. It was all set to become part of the law thanks to the campaigning by Dalit organizations, but these groups have been campaigning very, very intensively to get it stopped, and they've got the Tory party on their side. So what has now happened is that the Conservatives have launched a consultation to the public to say, do you or do you not think it's necessary that we have legislation which outlaws caste discrimination? So I would urge all of you to look that up online and to fill it in and to make your voices heard so that these people cannot consolidate their influence here in Britain further. So anyway, just to conclude, I hope that this is the beginning of a whole summer of protest against what's happening in India. And I just think that, we must carry this forward and not let this be the last time that we gather together like this. Thank you.
For giving me the opportunity to speak here. I want to talk about the politics of beef and especially the entire way in which BJP is trying to in some way cast itself as this pro-animal or anti-animal cruelty thing, with this kind of very rabid vegetarianism which, is very convenient and marketable and fashion-friendly in the West. So, a few years ago in 2012, I remember tweeting from a beef festival and then getting responses that said, oh, you must be gang raped, you must be telecasted alive, or get the acid ready, do all of this. And at that time, as much as I was like, oh God, this is really gruesome, I never imagined that lynching that was happening over Twitter was going to actually translate on the streets into something real. I just thought this is male aggression, this is toxic masculinity, this is Hindutva. But the fact that it could so easily generate from, online hatred, and now I realize that the online hatred is only a reflection of what was simmering on the ground, what was, Hinduism's agenda all along, or Hindutva's agenda all along. And when you see this kind of killings, I really want to understand that, it's one thing that's happening in the cow belt or, the traditional Hindutva heartland, this kind of vicious murders and lynchings and pogroms. But also, as somebody from the south, I want to, point out that what is happening in Tamil Nadu and Kerala is even more worrying, at least to me personally, because this January, Chennai witnessed one of its largest protests in the Marina Beach, and people, irrespective of their political orientation, were coming on the beach and protesting for days against the ban on Jallikattu, which a lot of people think is about, cruelty to animals. It's about, but everyone forgets that people in the Marina Beach were actually shouting slogans against the RSS, against Modi, against the supremacy of the cow, against this cow protectionism, which said it's animal cruelty for people to engage in a sport which involved, cows and bulls. So at the heart of it, my friends who were part of the protest in January are now in jail. They have not had any charges framed against them. They are arrested under the National Security Act and also what is popularly known in Tamil Nadu as the Gundas Act. It's an act that you cannot apply for bail for at least a year. So it allows a kind of summary detention of activists. And so what we are seeing in the south of India, especially Kerala and Tamil Nadu, is that human rights defenders are already in prison. So that these kind of things happen, it's like a foregrounding. So the people who will shout, the people who will make noise when a lynching happens, they're already in prison. And the same thing is happening in Kerala. There is an organization called the JMP, which again fights for human rights. And now two leaders of the JMP who went to visit friends in jail were arrested. So we are living through a time where people who defend human rights are already being thrown in prison, and where the politics of the cow begins to, dictate things. And it's not only restricted to the traditional Hindutva heartland, but which is spreading to places like Tamil Nadu, like Kerala, which have resisted Hindutva, which have resisted this kind of supremacy of one religion where, harmony is a real fact. And so when I think about what is happening, I think we all should stand up. It doesn't matter what's the name of the protest. We can have our internal critics about it. We can critique, the idea of fair names or what name is, what it identifies. But the fact is, it's now we've come to a time where if you don't speak out, you're complicit with your silence. If you don't detach yourself from what is happening in the name of Hinduism or cow or whatever they call it, I think we are going to be culpable of the guilt that is, going to come with it. So it's time to, distance ourselves and also point fingers to what's happening. Today I saw an article in The Wire which said 86% of those who've been killed in cow-related violence are Muslims. The remaining are, of course, Dalits and women, and let's not forget that it's always the most marginalized people who are at the receiving end of it. And so, I think it's time for us to stand up, and I hope that, we make much more noise around here. And also, there are some soft-hearted vegetarians who do not understand the cow debate, but also explain to them what is happening is that, the cow is a proxy for killing, and the cow is a proxy for genocide. It's a proxy for a lot of control that's happening to a lot of people. And thank you for this opportunity again, and solidarity.
Thank you so much, Meena. We now have our very enthusiastic president, Ruzbe Hodiwala, and if anybody was instrumental in reviving the society, it was this ball of energy right here. Ruzbe.
Thank you very much, Danish. Thanks to all of you for coming in big numbers. Of course, day before yesterday when we came up with this idea, we wanted to have the simultaneous protest over here. We thought that probably we won't have more than 15 people, but we are glad that we have good number of people here. Probably I'm the only person over here who is a resident of Narendra Modi's former constituency. I remember when the riots took place, I would go on my terrace and look at the smoke, basically because the Hindu right-wing elements, they were burning up the shops, the shoe shops that were near my house. And since it was rubber and shoe, I could basically see, I would take my binoculars and look over there from the terrace and ask my parents that what is happening. I wonder if 100 years back, when Mahatma Gandhi was here, more than 100 of course, he ever imagined that we are going to lead a protest march to his statue because to condemn and to protest lynching, mob lynching in his very own country, for which he laid down his life. As a tribute, of course, 2 days back, our very own Prime Minister, during the press conference, or I think while addressing the Indian diaspora in Washington, he said that my government in 3 years has no taint at all. What right now I'm going to tell you guys is about the more than 20 taints that his government has got in these 3 years since he became the Prime Minister, which he as Prime Minister has always failed to condemn, and we as diaspora abroad, we have failed. We always applaud him, we praise him, but nobody questions him that what is happening in India. The very social fabric of our country is endangered. The secular constitution that our freedom fighters envisioned for is in danger. And RSS wants India to be a Hindu Rashtra in 100 years from the year of its inception, establishment. And they are already successful. When you see the map of India and the constituencies that are ruled by the Saffron Party, it's absolutely saffron. As a tribute to each and every victim of mob lynching in India, I would like to, of course, read in detail each and every incident with the name of the person and the city or the state. Please allow me, it is going to be a little bit long, but as a tribute to each and every victim and our solidarity with them, we have to do this. On March 5th, 2015, a mob broke into a jail and dragged Syed Khan, a rape accused, out of the jail, stripped him naked, pelted him with stones, and displayed his body on a clock tower. In September 15, 2015, Mohammad Atlaq of Dadri in Uttar Pradesh was killed in a mob lynching, and his son Danish Atlaq was severely injured in the assault due to the rumors that the family was storing beef. In Jammu and Kashmir, Udhampur, October 2015, a truck was attacked with petrol bombs by Hindu extremists after rumors of it carrying dead cows emerged. Zahid Ahmed, the truck driver, succumbed to his injuries 10 days later, while another man suffered serious burn injuries. Just 10 days after the Udhampur attack, the independent MLA, Engineer Rashid, was attacked by activists belonging to the right-wing group Hindu Sena. The activist blackened his face just after he finished a press conference after 9 or 10 days of the attack. Around the same period in October 2016, a 20-year-old named Noman from Saharanpur, Himachal, was killed by the villagers for allegedly being involved in smuggling cattle. In January 2016, Mohammad Hussain and his wife Nasima Bano were assaulted by the members of the Gauraksha Samiti in Harda district of Madhya Pradesh when they objected to the luggage being searched on suspicion that they were carrying beef. In March 2016, at Jharkhand, two Muslim cattle traders, Mazloom Ansari and teenager Imtiaz Khan, were heading to an animal fair in a nearby city. They were lynched and hanged by a mob. In April 2016, Mustain Abbas, a 27-year-old father of four, who was traveling back home after buying bulls from Haryana, was killed after being fired upon by Gauraksha Dal members, which are basically the cow vigilantes. A group of cow vigilantes who are affiliated to, let's be very honest, they are affiliated to Bajrang Dal and VHP, who are, of course, the sister organizations and arms and branches of RSS, the so-called ideologue of BJP, the current ruling party in India. In July 2016, four Dalit youths were severely beaten up and dragged on the road for nearly a kilometer in Una town in Gujarat for allegedly possessing beef. After this particular incident, few Dalit leaders from Gujarat, they basically led a procession called Chalo Una, let's go to Una, whereby more than 15 or 20,000 Dalits gathered to protest mob lynching. The youth was stripped half naked, tied to a car in a crowded area and severely beaten up with iron pipes for over half an hour. And this youth, their job was to basically skin the cow. They were not killing it. The very own people in the locality had called them to skin the cow. The carcasses of the cow, of course. In Karnataka in July 2016, around 30 to 40 members of the Bajrang Dal attacked Dalit family of Mr. Balraj, claiming there was beef inside their house. Mr. Balraj was seriously injured and other family members sustained injuries during the assault. On 26 July 2016, two Muslim women, Salma Mewati and Shamin Akhtar Hussain, were assaulted at a railway station in Madhya Pradesh by the Bajrang Dal activists on the suspicion of carrying beef. In August 2016, in Andhra Pradesh, two Dalit men, Mokati and his brother Lazar, came under attack from a mob when they were doing their job to skin the cow that had died of natural causes. On April 1st, 2017, in Alwar district of Rajasthan, cow vigilantes affiliated to Vishwa Hindu Parishad and Bajrang Dal assaulted Mr. Pehlu Khan and four others who were transporting cows that they had recently purchased from an animal fair. Mr. Khan later died in a hospital. On April 12, 2017, in Jammu and Kashmir, 5 members of a nomad family, including a 9-year-old girl, were assaulted by the cow vigilantes with iron rods and pipes. In May 2017, a rickshaw driver in Delhi, Mr. Ravinder Kumar, was beaten to death by a mob of 20 because he raised objection when he saw two of them urinating in public. So, of course, the mob lynching is not just limited to cow and beef issue. Of course, the majority of the mob lynching incidences we face are related to possession of, on suspicious that the person is possessing beef. But mob lynching has become a regular trend, a minority voice, a political minority. If you do not agree with the majoritarian state or the people, you can be very well lynched, either digital lynching or the physical lynching itself. In June 2017, Mr. Zafar Khan died after being assaulted by the civil officials in Rajasthan state. Mr. Khan had objected to the civil officials clicking pictures of women defecating in the public. On June 22nd, 2017, 2014, that is just a week back, and that's why we are over here today, a 16-year-old Muslim boy from Haryana, Hafiz Junaid, was lynched to death and his three brothers attacked as they were traveling back from Delhi after shopping for Sunday's Eid. Just yesterday, a man named Usman Ansari of Jharkhand was thrashed and his house was set on fire after some villagers found the dead cow outside his house. So this is what India we live in right now. It is not quite unexpected because when we elected Mr. Narendra Modi, we probably undermined the agenda that he has. We undermined the platform that he represents, the RSS. It is for us, the young Indians, mostly many of us who are going back to our countries, to ensure that the 100-year goal is not successful. The opposition has already considered defeat for the 2019 elections. But the political agitation starts from social movements, and I hope that people in diaspora and in the country itself, they are instrumental in it and preventing the social fabric from being undermined in India. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rizve, for reminding everybody what kind of developments most people voted for back in 2014. Can we get Rahul Roy of SOAS to come and say a few words, please?
Hi everyone, and thanks for coming here. I don't really have a prepared speech, but I just want to say two or three things. Our esteemed colleague from the esteemed channel Times Now has been conducting a few interviews, beginning with the question whether one can really hold a government responsible for the actions that have been taking place. I hope that if he was listening to Subir as closely as he was filming him, he would have got his answer. I'd long thought that if I were ever on Times Now, one of the things I'd want to say is that your channel is part of the problem. And when I say your channel, I mean your channel, not just in the way that Arnab Goswami used to tell his viewers, your channel this, your channel that. This is your channel, it's not ours. But I want to say a couple of things about the Junaid Khan incident itself. One is that almost as horrifying as the incident was the silence of the witnesses on the train platform. Aarti Sethi has written a very good blog on Kafila describing this phenomenon in which it becomes possible for 200 Hindus on a station platform to simply not see a dead Muslim child. And I think this is something that we have to reflect on very carefully because it reflects a complicity that we all have in incidents like this and in their continuation. It also reflects, I think, a larger structural problem, which is the BJP's inability to see Muslims, or unwillingness, one should say, to see Muslims as citizens of the country. I think this is reflected, for example, in the fact that the BJP has not a single Muslim MP in the Lok Sabha. It's the first time that the ruling party has no Muslim representation whatsoever. And it's also reflected in more innocuous symbolic gestures, such as, for example, the cabinet's collective decision, I believe, to boycott the president's iftar party. It's a small thing, but I think it sends out a very powerful signal. I think we can speculate why people on a station platform might be unwilling to come forward. We know that concepts such as witness protection in India are virtually non-existent, and so people are afraid for their lives, and one can understand that kind of fear. The fear is felt especially when we think of ourselves as individuals facing a hostile system. But if one of the things that this protest accomplishes, I hope, is that it demonstrates that we are not individuals facing a hostile system, but a collective. And as a collective, we can and must speak up. And we must especially speak up in situations like this where we are in sight of the injustice being committed. The other thing I wanted to say is that the hashtag #NotInMyName has already come in for criticism on social media, including from progressive voices. At one level, it can, of course, be a shallow slogan. Not in my name can imply simply distancing oneself from the problem and perhaps occupying a space that is pure and uncontaminated. But as a slogan, I think it can also mean what we make it mean. And I would hope that it means not just not in my name, but not in my eyesight, not within my earshot, not in my world. And I don't just mean world in a kind of solipsistic individual sense, but in the actually existing world that we inhabit and navigate and walk through. It must mean all of these things if it is to mean anything at all. I'm going to hand over the mic to my colleague Akshi, who will say a few words.
I think that amongst other things, what we need right now is better. Amongst other things, what we need right now is better understanding of the situation in which we find ourselves, because there is something very specific about the forms of violence that we are witnessing. At the same time, we can all also acknowledge that this is not the first time that this country has seen violence against Muslims, and these are not the first lynchings. We have a long history in India of public lynchings of Dalit populations, and this is something that we need to make a greater attempt to understand. Also something that demands our attention, and the best of our ability to think and respond is this government's ability to have a supposedly modern and a very neoliberal face which it presents to the world, where it says that this is a country where you should come and invest, this is a good country for business, and the link between that and this underside of brutal violence that we are witnessing. And in order to further this understanding and to be able to think of a response, which will need to be a long response, we are in this for the long term. This is not going to go away anytime soon, and we need to be able to think and plan for long duration, and we need to find amongst ourselves and with each other the strength to be able to come together and to be able to overcome, amongst other things, our own fear and our own apathy. We're going to be organizing some events in the coming weeks to try to talk to each other about what form our response can take, and I invite you to take the details of these events from me and to come together in shaping a response to what we are confronted by. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your words. Our penultimate speaker is Kunal Purohit. He was recently deemed a prostitute by a troll for when we were publicizing this on Twitter. So I give you the prostitute.
Badge of honor, please. Ruzbe's speech and his list that he read out, unfortunately, isn't updated enough, because, as we know, news is flying thick and fast. Incidents are happening as we even as we speak. This morning, we got the news that while we were asleep last night in Jharkhand, a woman was lynched because she was suspected of kidnapping children. And one would actually think this has nothing to do with religion, this has nothing to do with politics. But this is exactly the point that we're trying to miss here, It's not the lynching per se, because lynchings have happened in India as they've happened in other countries. It's the language of the lynching. What is the language here, and what is the woman who has been accused of kidnapping children being called? She was called a Bangladeshi. This is the language of the lynching. Junaid Khan, the latest victim, the 16-year-old victim, he was having a train dispute. He was having a dispute in the train about seats. Anyone who has traveled in Indian trains will know that's the most common thing that you'll experience. But it's the language again. What was he accused of? He was accused of eating beef while he was just indulging in a train dispute. He was accused of having a beard. He was accused of being circumcised. Is this the language that we are now looking at? Is this the language of our dispute? Is this what it comes to then? And this is something that we all must remember, Everyone who believes that, lynchings are not new in India, lynchings have happened. And I've been reading a lot of press reports which have also criticized the reaction in these protests, because they've dug out statistics from the previous governments. And lynchings again have happened, but it's the language that the lynchers are now employing. It's the nature. And why are we lynching people again? 52% of the people who were killed were lynched because there were rumors of them having beef. Rumors are now the basis of us killing each other. And this is exactly what this government is now perpetrating, and this is something that we we all need to be aware, we all need to be cautious of. Quite a few speakers have also said that Prime Minister Modi has been silent, he's not been speaking, but I don't quite agree. I mean, I'm a critic, but he's been tweeting, he tweeted about the forest fire in Portugal. I mean, isn't that what a statesman is supposed to do? He's a statesman, he's not just a Prime Minister. So he's tweeting, he's hugging Donald Trump, and by the way, there are similarities. I was reading a report yesterday about how Donald Trump has for the first time cancelled the Ramadan dinner that the White House traditionally hosts. And I was thinking, I mean, the 3 hugs or the 4 hugs that they had, Trump and Modi, quite actually fit in, because Modi, since he took over, has not had one Ramadan dinner, which was again a traditional ceremony that Indian prime ministers, Indian premiers have when they are in office. Modi has cancelled them. In the last dinner that they had, he ensured none of his ministers even turned up for the president's dinner. So again, this is a very sort of selective way of looking at politics, communalizing politics and communalizing symbols which have always been associated with religious harmony. I think someone a few days back wrote how the BJP seems to have finally learnt its lesson. And how has it learnt its lesson, Modi has, since 2002, been accused of orchestrating or, at the best, being very ineffective in controlling the riots. And the riots have been a stain on him. And if you look at a protracted riot, a riot is a big headline. A riot remains on the stage. A riot remains a stain. But a lynching doesn't, A lynching becomes normalized because of the situations that you create around it. And I think it's important to note all of these things while we look at lynchings as a phenomena, which is why we're all here to show our solidarity, to show our support to people who are fighting things back home, to just shame the BJP, to just shame politicians who are trying to create political symbols out of the cow, out of beef, out of everything else it can be. So I'm glad you guys have come here. We'll be going to the Gandhi statue in a bit once we finish the speeches. Thank you again for coming here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kunal. Our last speaker is an author and academic at the University of Westminster, Dr. Natasha Cole.
Yeah, I was thinking about what to say here today, and and how does one start responding to it? And images came up first of all. So in the U.S. during in the 19th century, I remember this person whose research it was. They used to have these postcards of black people being lynched, which were circulated at Christmas. And they used to have little children standing there, little white children standing there, smiling as they looked at, a black person hanging from a tree who had been lynched. And the role of the state and the statistic in all of that, because one of the things they did was to remove in the forms the bit that said cause of death could be lynching. So, just to make sure that those kinds of things become invisible. So when I was hearing Rahul speak about, the invisibility, it's that kind of heightened visibility/invisibility that we get when we look at, say, Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, the way in which the blackness marks him. And in something like that, I think the otherness is being marked in a most violent and exterminating kind of way in India today. It's obviously not just happening in India, there's violence of all kinds happening everywhere. But it is important to see that our widest connections as human beings mean that when we see that kind of violence, and especially if it is in any way liable to be justified in terms of our identity, that we stand up and say, not in my name. And so for that reason, although any protest, any dissent will always be inadequate and problematic, but it is very important to stand up and say that. So in India today, and partly I wanted to speak last, I think also because I wanted to say the others are the Muslims, they are the Dalits, they are the people of the Northeast, they are the Kashmiris, they are the poor farmers, they are the environmentalists, they are the they are the people who work for non-governmental organizations, they're people who are human rights activists. And this is a multifaceted, multidimensional, and relentless onslaught that's being backed by the state in one way or the other through changing people who lead institutions, through symbolic appointments, through symbolic things like, for example, not commemorating, Eid in the way that it used to happen. And these kinds of signals are they're forging a polity that is becoming ever more confident of being able to get away, literally, with murder. So, Narendra Modi, of course, I was listening to his speech with Trump. The very fact that these hollow men can stand there and talk about their shared values of democracy is, in the face of what they stand for. Modi in, 2002, genocide in Gujarat. Even until now, like even today, the judge who put many of those culprits who were people who were tried and put in jail for that, she fears for her life. The public prosecutor just last month resigned without saying why he was resigning, a very well-known public prosecutor in that case. One by one, many of the people who were convicted of the most heinous crimes in that genocide are being let off. They're being let out of jails. And, all of this is happening it's not unseen, but it's invisible in that way. The person who's leading the chief minister appointed by Modi in the state of Uttar Pradesh, Yogi Adityanath, is a violent Hindu extremist who has in the past and on several recorded occasions spoken out very hatefully against minorities. He's shared the stage with a Hindu power kind of rally where one of the speakers called for Hindu men to exhume the graves of dead Muslim women and to rape them. That man today is the chief minister appointed by Modi of India's most populous state. This is not somebody somewhere making it up. All of these are facts, and if we choose to go and look, as more and more of us should, not only people who have any kind of Indian origin or Indian diaspora, but everyone. Because remember, the Prime Minister here also wants us not to be citizens of nowhere, because citizens of everywhere are citizens of nowhere, which means they are citizens of now and here, and that means that these things are all connected. So when we have the economic violence of the we care about the World Trade Center towers as people should have, of the attacks on them, but there's the Grenfell Tower too. There's the Grenfell Tower where people were burnt. There's all those people who are burnt on trains, and all these kinds of injustices globally are linked, the economic and the political, which is why Modi's Hindutva agenda is legitimized internationally because of all that development talk, because he's going to buy those planes from Trump, as they've just announced recently. So the global oppressions, I think, are both of neoliberalism and nationalism are immensely interlinked, and we cannot make sense of one without the other, because many of the people who elected Modi thought that this was about development, but development and Hindutva are both sort of like, they're both part of this hate DNA, of this hate that is being proliferated. Now, finally, about the not in my name, because we have seen, I have certainly seen many people who've said, well, not in my name is a kind of disengagement, it comes from a position of privilege. Yes, perhaps in some sense it does come from a position where you can say not in my name because you are not the person who's actually having to face that violence. But that is better, if it takes this to wake up the conscience of many Indians, why not? But certainly a collective conscience that needed, Afzal Guru, the Kashmiri person who was hanged and buried in prison, and the judge said it is being done to satisfy the collective conscience of the nation. So if that collective conscience could not wake up then, at least, whatever wakes it up, let's go with that. But I think the not in my name is also about withdrawing consent. As somebody who on 15th February 2003 was at Hyde Park with all those million people, although we didn't stop the war, we tried our level darndest best. The not in my name is important, because what we are saying is that it's not that you're not carrying it out in my name and therefore I'm not a part of it. What we are saying is that this is I am withdrawing my consent. It's a kind of symbolic civil disobedience. We're saying you who think you are the representatives of and acting in our name do not have our consent. You are not doing this in our name, and we will do whatever we can to resist this. And so I think that that there are, as all of the speakers have pointed out, all of this is the pace of it, of course, is accelerated. But this is not anything new. This is a country that recently rewarded a Major Gogoi who had tied a Kashmiri man to the front of a tank and used him as a human shield. This is a country where women are gang raped and burnt and chopped to pieces, happened in UP, where all of this kind of violence continues. But what's different is that it's not just random violence where people are acting on the basis of their prejudices and hate. This is being systematically condoned, encouraged, and facilitated by the people who are in power. And those people are globally trading with this talk of democracy and markets, not even, let alone the fact that, with after demonetization, even growth isn't happening. So it is really important that we build and grow these things. And also when we go to the Tavistock Square right now, we'll go to the statue of Gandhi, and we know that is, there's a whole aporia there about Gandhi as a figure himself. But I would like to say, as a resident of this area, there are two other things in that park. There's a monument to conscientious objectors, people who in war refuse to fight, and there is a tree, a cherry tree, which every spring, is the most extravagant reminder of how, each of those petals could be a person. It's called the Hiroshima tree, and it was planted in memory of the victims of the Hiroshima bombing. So human beings are capable of the most atrocious, horrendous things, but also when they choose to they are capable of standing up and saying and speaking from and acting from a place of conscience. And I think that is really important, that for us to learn how to be human. And thank you to everyone who's here, and I hope we'll build and grow this.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Cole, and to our other speakers.